Hey guys, we're still working with decimals, and today we're going to start dividing decimals, and we're going to start out by doing it on a number line. Okay, when we're dividing numbers, we can use, you know how in multiplication, if you're not quite sure how to multiply, you can do repeated addition how many times until you get there. Well, you can also do repeated subtraction when you divide, since multiplying is the opposite of dividing and adding is the opposite of subtraction, then we can use that method. So on the first one, it has 29 divided by 5.8. Well, if I use repeated subtraction, I would want to make sure I put my decimal points, because if we're going to be subtracting, we know we need our decimal points lined up. So I had 29 whole ones divided by 5.8. So the 5.8 becomes what I'm going to keep repeatedly subtracting. So I can't do this, so I need to put a 0. Now you notice it doesn't change the value of the number. The number is still 29. Okay, I can't take 8 from 0, so I'm going to have to borrow, and he will become an 8, and he will become a 10. So now I can subtract. 10 minus 8 is 2, 8 minus 5 is 3, and 2 minus nothing is 2. And if we notice on our number line, they went from 29 to 23.2, just like we did when we subtracted. So that's what they did here. They subtracted 5.8. And if we use repeated subtraction of the 5.8, we can't take 8 from 2, so we would have to borrow. And he's going to loan him some, but he has to borrow over here first. So the 2 will become a 1. The 3 would have become a 13, but he's already promised a little bit of what he borrowed to the 2, so he would become a 12. And then the 2 would become a 12 because he got the whole multiple of 10. And then we subtract. 12 minus 8 is 4. Drop the decimal. 12 minus 5 is 7. And 1 minus nothing is 1. So again, we got what they got. So yes, they are using repeated subtraction of 5.8. And we can tell by this number line that these are all even. They made even hops. So we know that that's what they were doing each time, is they were doing repeated subtraction of 5.8 each time until they got all the way to a 0 remainder. So in knowing this, if you are dividing on a number line, you can start at the number you were given, so we'll start at 29 because that's what we were given, and we were dividing it into 5.8 sections, little sections of repeated subtraction of 5.8. So we would hop 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We hop all the way till we get to 0 remainder. And every how many hops we took, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is what our quotient will be. So 29 divided by 5.8 is 5. Okay, on the next one, 12 divided by 1.5. So if we look at that as repeated subtraction, we would start with 12. We'd line up 3 decimals because we're going to be subtracting, and when we're subtracting decimals, we always keep the decimals in line. So we had 12 whole ones is what we started with, and we're dividing it into 1 5/10 sections, and we would repeatedly subtract until we get to 0. So we'll have to placeholder 0 there so we have something to subtract from. I can't take 5 from 10, so I'm going to have to borrow a multiple of 10 from the 2, and he would become a 1. And since it was a multiple of 10, the 0 would become 10. So 10 minus 5 is 5. 1 minus 1 is 0. And 1 minus nothing is 1. so we got 10.5, and that's what they got. So we'll just check it one more time. We'll use repeated subtraction one more time just to make sure that all of their little sections are even, are equal. So 5 minus 5 is 0. Can't take 1 from 0, so we would have to borrow a multiple of 10, so he becomes a 10. 10 minus 1 is 9, and that is the next number they got. So now we know that, yes, that is what they're doing, is using repeated subtraction of 1.5 each time. So we start with the number, and then we hop 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times until we get to 0. And we know that every time we did this, they were subtracting 1.5. So ever how many hops you made, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that will be your quotient. Okay, on the next one, we would see if they were using repeated subtraction. We start with 17 whole ones, and they were dividing it up by 3 4/10 sections. So we would 0, can't take 4 from 0, so he would have to borrow a multiple of 10 from the 7. 10 minus 4 is 6, 6 minus 3 is 3, and 1 minus nothing is 1. So if we start at 17, what they gave us, and we got 13.6, and so did they. And then we can tell these are equal portions. So yes, that's what they were doing. They were repeatedly subtracting 3 4/10. So we would start at the number they gave us. We would repeatedly subtract 1.5 until we got to the 0. And we would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, on the next one. They started with 10 divided into sections of 2.5. So we know that they were repeatedly subtracting, but we're just going to double check to make sure. So we would have 10 whole ones being divided by 2.5 sections. So we would repeatedly subtract until we get to 0. We can't take 5 from 0, so he would have to borrow. He doesn't have quite enough to give him, so he has to borrow from the 1. He borrowed a whole multiple of 10, but he had already promised him some, so he only gets to keep 9. And then he will get the multiple of 10. So 10 minus 5 is 5, 9 minus 2 is 7, and 0 minus nothing is 0. So yeah, that's what they got, 7.5, and that's what we got. We can tell that these are equal sections, so they were using repeated subtraction until they got to 0. So we would start with the number they gave us, which was 10. Subtract 2.5, subtract 2.5, subtract 2.5, subtract 2.5, until we get no remainder. So 1, 2, 3, 4 times is how many times we would have had to repeatedly subtract 2.5. Okay. Again, we would start with the number that they gave us, and we can see that they repeatedly subtracted 6/10. So if we move all the way to 0 by subtracting 6/10, 6/10, 6/10, 6/10, 6/10, 6/10, 6/10. Wow. We would have had to have subtracted 6/10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. And the last one, if we start with 9 whole ones, and we subtract, because we're subtracting, or we're dividing it up into sections of 4.5. We can't take 5 from 0, so we would have to borrow from the 9. He borrowed a whole multiple of 10. 10 minus 5 is 5, decimal place. 8 minus 4 is 4. So if they subtracted 4.5, which they did, and we can see that they're equal, so if we start at the number they gave us, subtract 4.5, subtract 4.5, we would end up with 0 remainder. So we would have had to have subtracted 4.5 2 times. Okay, I'm going to let you guys go on that next sheet, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.